We've been talking about unit rates and unit price, and today we're going to look at what a visual representation of that looks like when you see it on a graph, and also how to look at a graph and find a unit rate or unit price. So let's look at our first example. So here is our graph, and it is comparing two things. It is comparing the number of points and the number of games. Now remember, the unit rate means how much for one. So for this example, you could either do the number of points per game or the number of games per point. So we're going to think about what makes more sense with that, the number of points per game or the number of games per point. So one way to do that is sort of like how we talked about finding a unit rate. Your bigger numbers are going to go on top. So that would mean our points is going to go on top, and that would make it points per game. And that just kind of makes more sense anyway. Here's another really pretty good tip for doing this. Think about the word per being here, and so then you read it around. So we go points per game. So we're looking for the number of points per game. That means that we're looking for how many points in one game. So to find that, we find one game. Here's one game. We go up from that until we're on the line that shows how many points for one game. So right here is that point. When we come over, we're at 20. So that means that the rate is 20 points per game. All right, let's look at another example. Here's another graph. And again, think about putting the word per
right down there where your two axes meet. So when we see that, we're going to see that the rate we're looking for is dollars per hour. And so when we do that, oops, I forgot the word per in there, so dollars per hour. So when we look at that, that means we want to know how many dollars in 1 hour. So when we look at where our hours are, we see 0 and we see 2. We don't see 1, but 1 has to be here right between 0 and 2. So if I go up from that until I'm on the blue line there and then come across, I'm right here. Well, that's not labeled, so I have to think about how much that is. Well, from here to here, this total distance is 60. So if I split it into two parts, that means that this right here has to be 30. So that's going to mean that it's $30 per hour. Let's look at another example. Looking at this one, we're going to do the number of sit-ups per minute. So looking at that, we want to know how many sit-ups in 1 minute. So we have to find 1 minute. 1 minute is right here. If we go up from that, we have a point right here. The problem is, though, that's not exactly on one of our grid lines. So we don't really want to use that point. Instead, what we should do is use a point that's definitely on where two of the black grid lines meet. So when I do that, I'm going to have to come over, I'm going to have to follow this line, this blue line up, and right there they meet at a point that's where two grid lines meet. So when I look at that, that ratio is 2 minutes and 40 sit-ups. So the ratio of sit-ups to minutes is 40 sit-ups in 2 minutes. Then how many sit-ups in 1 minute? If I use my cross multiply and divide, I'm going to do 1 times 40 divided by 2. And when I do that, it's going to give me that x is 20. So it's going to be 20 sit-ups per minute. All right, let's look at a couple more. Looking at this one. For this unit rate, we're going to look at the number of gallons per hour. And when I look at that, I'm going to need to, again, I want to find a point that is where two of my grid lines cross. So for example, here, or here, or here, or here, or here. But it has to be on that blue line. So the first place I see where that happens is here. Now I could also use this point here if I wanted to, but I generally tend to pick the smallest numbers I can, simply because it makes my math easier. Now you might use a calculator to do this, and that would be okay, or not. But either way, I would generally pick the smaller numbers to work with. And we're looking again for the number of gallons per hour. So I'm going to need to set up a bridge map to do this one, since I don't have a 1 right there on my axis. Even if I looked right here, this is going to be 1 5/10 because it's halfway between 0 and 3. So I certainly can't find where 1 is on the axis and just go straight up from that. So when I look at this, I'm going to look at the number of gallons per hour, and the ratio that I know that goes to this spot right here is 6 hours, and this spot right here is going to be 60 gallons because it's halfway between 0 and 20. So there's 60 gallons in 6 hours. How many gallons in 1 hour? Cross multiply and then divide. 1 times 60 divided by 6 equals x. And when I do that, I'm going to get that x equals 10. So the unit rate that's shown on this graph is 10 gallons per hour. All right, I'm going to give you a couple that I want you to try on your own. Pause while you're trying them. And once you think you have the correct rates, then I want you to hit play and see if you were in fact correct. All right, here are our answers for these. And so this first one, where I got it from, is I looked right here, and I said right there is 1 hour, and it's going to come across to here. So I can see that I'm counting by 30s on my axis, so this has to be 60 miles per hour. For the next one, I picked out this point right here, and I said the ratio of pages per hour is 150 pages in 2 hours. When I solve that, I get that x equals 75. Remember, I have to cross multiply and divide. 1 times 150 divided by 2 is 75. So it's 75 pages per hour. For the next one, I used this point. But even, let's say if we used a different point. Let's say that we used this one right here. Even if I used that one, I'm still going to get the same answer. I would have a ratio there of 9 and 540. So the ratio of calories to tacos is 540 calories in 9 tacos. So if I would work out how many calories in 1 taco, when I do the math on it, 1 times 540 divided by 9, I'm going to get 60 calories per taco. All right, now try a few more of these. Pause while you're trying it, and once you have tried all of them, then hit play and see if you were correct. So for the first one, it's going to be $20 per foot. And again, I can use whichever point I want to along this line that crosses an axis. So perhaps I want to use this one right here. And so if I use that one, the ratio is $500 for 25 feet. So I could set it up $500. I need to change that, not 25 on top. I'm going to do the ratio of dollars to feet is $500 for 25 feet. When I solve that, I'm going to do 1 times 500, which is 500, and 500 divided by 25, which is not 20, actually. It's going to be, it is going to be 20, which is going to be $20 per foot. So I get $20 per foot when I work that one out. All right, my next one. When I look at my next one, I'm going to use these two right here. And right there at that point, it shows me that the cost per candy bar is $1 for 2 candy bars. So what that means is how much money for 1 candy bar. So I'm going to do 1 times 1, which is 1, and 1 divided by 2 is 1/2, or 50 cents. So it's 50 cents per candy bar. All right, last but not least, this last one's pretty easy because we have a 1 right here on our axis. We have a point right here up from it, and we have a 20 right there for our number of words. So that one's going to be 20 words per minute. All right, what we will do with this, what you can do with this, you can do lots of things with this. You can look at a graph and see if it's proportional, because first of all, it has to make a straight line, and it has to start at the origin, which is where the 0 is on each of these graphs. Second of all, you can use a graph to find a unit rate, and once you have that, you can also use the graph to make a ratio table or do other things with it that we'll learn about later on.